How's it rockin', Dween Nation? This is the Dween Sports Podcast. We're about to get underway. But before we do, we'd love if you could like, comment, subscribe, or share. We are posting weekly sports content, and we want to build up the brand that is Dween Sports. Thank you all, and enjoy.
But anyway, let's move to the Broncos now, a team that shocked a lot of people, got a playoff spot. They lost to the Bills, but there's a lot of hope and optimism with Bo Nix heading into this season. I'm really happy with what they did. They addressed a lot of the defense in the offseason, but their biggest need is running back in this draft class. So I'm really excited to see a Sean Payton matching up with a star running back headed into this year. But what are your thoughts with the Broncos and what we've seen so far?
You know what, Justin? You mentioned that wild card game against Buffalo, and I think that first drive, Bo Nix had a bomb to Marvin Mims, I believe.
Yep. It
And
was
that
Troy
first
Franklin.
Troy Franklin, and they were teammates in college, and
Right.
so it's like you had some promise there in that wild card round there. And maybe we could have maybe seen Baltimore and Kansas City. It's they started off so hot, and then Buffalo just said nah. Here's the thing, Justin. Here's the thing. I think that Denver could potentially be riding a little bit of their coattails from like they're a little bit too high on themselves and what happened. And I think it's time to just be humble. Remember last year I picked them to be picking top 3 in this draft right now, Justin. I thought Denver was going to be picking top 3 and potentially getting Travis Hunter. I think that they need a wide receiver. I like Audric Estime there. I think the 5th round out of Notre Dame last year.
Right. Yeah.
I think he's solid. And they do have Jaleel McLaughlin there. I think that could work. It's not like Dallas where it's Miles Sanders and I forgot the other guy already. Javonte, the former Bronco. And it's kind of like, I'm discussing. I actually like this backfield in Denver.
Really?
It's not bad. If you can keep him healthy, I like it. But hey, if you can get Amari Hampton, I think he fits the best in Denver. I'd love to see Amari Hampton. And, Sean Payton has had some good running backs in New Orleans, right? Pierre Thomas, he's had Mark Ingram. Obviously, who can forget Alvin Kamara's first couple of years was dynamite. Still is pretty good in New Orleans. And so I think he needs to find his next running back. And I think that, Javonte was never really his guy. And he's kind of working with the running backs from the previous head coach there. And so I think that now he can get his guy there. And maybe you can pair up an Audric Estime with a Hampton or a Jukins. And that would really be fun to watch there. But I think they need a wide receiver there because I like Courtland Sutton. Can he replicate again? He's been around for some time. I like Troy Franklin. I like Marvin Mims. They need a number 1 guy, and I think that would be good. Defensively, I think they also need they have Zach Allen as their left defensive end. I think that if they can get another defensive end, I think they'd be really good. I think also I like the signing of Talona Hufanga, who's a former 49er, and I liked him there, Justin, but he got hurt. I think he was hurt for the Super Bowl last year with the 49ers. I think he was kind of hurt for this year, most of this year with San Francisco. But I like him to have a bounce back season in Denver. But I need another corner there to go along with Pat Surtain. Obviously, they probably won't do that in the first round, but I like Singleton. I like Greenlaw as their linebackers. Bonito. I think that's really solid there, Justin. They just need. They need a defensive end, maybe a nose tackle to boost that defense there because they're a couple pieces away from being a pretty solid defense themselves, Justin, because they were a pretty good fantasy defense. But I think that wide receiver and defense is what Denver needs to get over the hump.
I mean, so the only thing I'll differ from what you've talked about is I think that this running back room is really incomplete. I don't think they're satisfied with what they have currently.
Yeah.
But I will agree, Omari and Hampton would be perfect there. And I wouldn't be surprised if they have the 20th overall pick. If JT's gone, they could go ahead and pick Hampton there. Like, I think that is a very strong possibility for the Broncos. And with Hampton as a Bronco, to me, he's a top 4 round pick. Like, I think 4th round would be really good. Yeah. Possibly 3rd round. Like, that's how high I am on Omari and Hampton. Now, the only thing there with that is the Broncos have already gone through trying out a top-tier North Carolina running back in Javonte Williams, and it didn't work out. But I think Omari and Hampton is a better prospect than Javonte was those years ago. But I think that they're going to address running back, and then they will maybe scoop up a wide receiver. I could see it though. I could see a world where they think they're fine with what they have at wide receiver. They got Sutton, and they think maybe Franklin or Mims can step into a more um, reliable role in 2025. Devon Vele wasn't too bad last year. And then also two very under the radar pickups in Trent Sherfield, A.T. Perry. And then, oh my God, we didn't even discuss this guy, but I think one of the best signings for a young Bo Nix is Evan Ingram. Evan
Absolutely.
Ingram is a great signing, and I think will become a very solid tight end fantasy option because Evan Ingram, we saw it for a couple of years in Jacksonville where he really stepped into a role where he was getting a ton of receptions, getting a ton of looks. And for a young cornerback like Bo Nix, I think that would be great for him. So maybe they're fine with their pass catchers because they brought in Evan Ingram, but I think they will address running back most definitely in the draft. But if I'm a Broncos fan, you're excited. I think you're big excited. As long as Bo Nix doesn't have a sophomore slump, they're in line for I think those three teams, the Chargers, Chiefs, and Broncos, all have a very strong possibility of winning the division. Like I really think there's a chance of it heading into 2025. What do you give? Obviously, the Chiefs probably have the highest odds of winning the division again, but what odds do you give the Chargers or the Broncos at doing so?
Man, Justin, these two teams are so similar, right? Because these are two head coaches that have a lot of history going against each other. You know, who can forget Harbaugh versus Sean Payton in a San Francisco, New Orleans wild divisional matchup? I think Vernon Davis, or it might have been Vernon Davis with the game-winning touchdown, where the Saints kind of had that game in Candlestick. These two coaches were the coaches, Justin, that we kind of grew up watching, right?
Yeah.
And they have similar defenses. They have similar quarterbacks. Both wore number 10 in Oregon. Both kind of play the same. And they both kind of have similar skill sets where they don't have a number one, so to speak. Like they have Courtland Sutton and Aladdin McConkey, which are good, but not number one yet. Like not sensational Jefferson Jamar. They have running backs that I like estimate to be a really good goal line back. And I like Najee Harris as well to be. So these are two teams that are so similar. It all depends on who is injured as far like the injuries, right? Like who is injured in like the defensive players on both sides. I'm gonna go with Denver actually, Justin, because that home field advantage is sick. You got to play 8 games at Mile High Stadium. That is difficult, and then you got a defense that's pretty crazy there. Not to mention, I got a coach that's won a Super Bowl, which versus a coach that's been so close to win a Super Bowl. So I think that's like the edge right there. Harbaugh has a little bit of flaws we saw in that wild card game. As to where Sean Payton and the Broncos, we didn't expect him to make the playoffs. We didn't expect him to go to Buffalo and compete with a MVP Josh Allen. But I like Denver going forward because I like Estime. He's a guy that I like, and they could pair him up with the Hampton. That to me is better than a Najee. And I don't think LA is going to really focus on wide receiver as to where maybe Denver does. And the Titans there, you mentioned Evan Ingram. That I cannot believe I forgot about him because Justin, if you're drafting and round 7 comes around, that is Evan Ingram round. Look for Evan Ingram round 7. Sure. He is going to be really good, Justin. I think he was very unappreciated in Jacksonville. I think Doug Peterson and that offense kind of gave up. They kind of were, oh my goodness, Brian Thomas that. But Evan Ingram, he is going to be a phenomenal go-to target for Bo Nix. And I think he's going to be a top 5, top 7 tight end because look at the tight ends that are still in New Orleans right now. Juwan Johnson, Taysom Hill, I don't think Taysom Hill is no longer a Saint, but still ran his course even after Sean Payton left. And you know who can forget Jimmy Graham's prime years? And I think that Evan Ingram physically is a little bit. You can compare him to Jimmy Graham. Yeah, so I'd take Denver.
Then I at a point I think we can both agree. Then Evan Ingram might be the most underrated fantasy tight end at the moment, at a current state, because he, at the end of his tenure with Jacksonville last year, he was injured, and we didn't see those big performances like we saw the year prior. But I still think Evan Ingram's got that in his bag. So Broncos are looking up. It looks like the Chargers are looking up. The Chiefs, I think, are looking up in the fact that I think they're a hungry team again.